Please be seated. First, is this loud enough? Okay, I'm looking especially to the people at the back, and I got that. Brothers and sisters in Christ, I speak as a deacon who brings stories and experiences from the world into the church today through a sermon. I'm neither an academic nor a theologian. They are blessed, so are you, so am I. We all have gifts and we all fall short of the glory of God. May our individual gifts make a community far greater than any one of us could achieve alone. The Anglican lectionary advises that Transfiguration Sunday, and I say advises, you'll find out why very soon, and I'm reading here, reminds us of our true nature in Christ and looks forward as we begin our Lenten journey. Second, emphasize the hope of salvation at Easter prefigured in the Transfiguration. Problem confession. I got stuck in the reading, in the gospel reading, captured by a single powerful word. I couldn't move beyond it. So how did I resolve that? Solution one, if any of you would like some church homework this week, please go to the Anglican lectionary, look at those questions again, and consider them carefully because they matter, they're important. Solution two, make that single word the focus of this sermon, and that's what I'm going to do. The word is listen. Listen to whom? My son, the chosen. Traditionally, the week's gospel reading is the source of the sermon. The last 2 weeks, I'm going to go back to those as well. Our readings have been Jesus teaching from the hillside. Whoa, look at that. How's that? From Jesus teaching from the hillside overlooking the Sea of Galilee, the Sermon on the Mount. After 2,000 years and my whole lifetime, I can repeat the teaching, yet each time I, and I suspect most of us or all of us, come to them, I, at least, am startled and confused. Blessed are who? Should I seek to be poor? Do I want to be hungry, weeping, hated? Woe is who? Should I avoid at all costs being rich, being well-fed, laughing, well thought of? Brian and I know each other from former lives. I'm going to turn my back in a second. I'm taking a chance, but I was told that this is a low Anglican church, so I think I can get away with it. And just so you know, my vote on these two questions is my arm stays down. So I'm going to turn around, and Brian, I'm going to ask you when I turn back how many people put their hands up, because I don't need to know the individuals. It's a poll. Hands up is yes. Hands down is no. Are you doing all in your power to be poor, hungry, weeping, hated? Are you doing all in your power to avoid rich, well-fed, laughing, well thought of? Brian. And? And to be clear, my hand is down. So my reflection is, if I'm always startled and confused by this reading that I know literally by heart, did I ever really listen? The teachings collide again and again with the iceberg of my complacency. Will I ever understand? And to listen and to understand certainly Well, it should mean I change. Will I ever change? The transfiguration of Jesus is dramatic and visual. Maybe action is easier to understand than words, especially for a deacon. Probably not if you were there in person. Peter at least saw what was happening, and he was, to be fair, shocked. Like me too often, he was overwhelmed by an urge to do something. So he offered to make 3 dwellings, which was generous. Busy at the wrong ministry. And God intervened in person here very directly. This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him. Don't do something. First, listen to him. Listen for what purpose? Paul says in our readings this week, mercifully deliver us from the darkness of the world. So listen to him is important. It's central. Easy to do? Maybe not. Maybe not. Paul said of those who do not accept Jesus that their minds are hardened, or in more poetic terms, their ears are deaf. Who among us, Peter included, is not deaf sometimes, and upon further reflection, many times? Why is it so hard for me and so many others to listen? Let me offer you a personal reflection, and I hope this will generate your own reflection. When I was young, I understood that I listened with my ears. As I became increasingly adult, I understood that I listened with my mind through my ears. The ears stimulated the mind. And as I lived longer yet, especially as our children came, I understood that I listened with my mind and my emotion, stimulated through my ears. It took experience, also known as many mistakes for a very long time, to understand my mind and emotions as deeply intertwined, and to make a duality, a heart-brain dualism, one subordinate to the other, was a form of idolatry and a path of confusion. It took help from church communities like this one, and more time for me to aspire to listen to God. The Hebrew word for God is the sound of a breath softly exhaled. Yahweh, Yahweh. For most of us, not Peter on that day of the Transfiguration, but for most of us throughout our life, the language of God is silence going into the world, a soft name speaking a silent language. We need quiet space to hear God's silent voice. We must be vulnerable to clear our ears, mind, and emotions. We must be vulnerable to allow the voice, the silent voice, to soften our emotions, broaden our mind, and point us towards unity and mercy. A hard heart, a hard mind, they're not vulnerable. Listening first with the soul centers, cleans, and prepares the mind and the emotions to listen. Where and how do you listen? It's okay to be different. May you know your language with God. May you hear your guidance. May you follow it. For myself, I feel the guidance of God during magical moments that I cannot conjure up. They happen. They're magical moments in contemplative prayer and in moving through creation. It can be positive often as the energy of connection, a sense of warmth, of trust, of hope. It can be negative as when my mind says, do it, and my emotions say, do it. And there's no connection, no warmth, just vacant, very unwelcome silence. A different type of silence. A different message in the language of silence. It takes faith that that type of silence doesn't darken in us towards despair. Words will come later to message the guidance so that we can talk in places like this and help us understand each other. Sometimes the message surprises people, certainly including the speaker, because when we listen well, we can be transformed. Faith is the trust to be vulnerable and to accept and to do. This, I bring to you, is to listen, and it opens us to be transformed. Peter learned to listen, and what a harvest. Each of us have the gift of this one day. Let each of us go in this one day and do likewise.